Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Safety Brief. I'm your host, Elizabeth, and today we're diving deep into a topic that affects workplaces worldwide, and that's mental health and cybersecurity. Joining me today is Matt and Mike, as always. Thank you both for being here. It's much appreciated.
You bet.
To kick off our conversation, let's talk about the intersection of mental health and cybersecurity. How do mental health issues such as stress, anxiety, and so on impact an employee's sensitivity to phishing attacks and other cybersecurity threats?
Yeah, it's a good topic, and this is mental health is not one that we embark on lightly. I think it's something that's easy to talk about as an external um, outside thing. And I think it's something that if the past 2 to 3 years have taught us anything as a society, that it's everybody's cross to bear. It's everybody's problem to manage, and not problem as in it's like a permanent ailment, but there are certainly seasons in which it is very difficult. It's very difficult to stay mentally resilient. And we can say all these niceties. We can come on here and talk for 30 minutes about here's what you need to do and positive mental attitude, but just acknowledging that it is a marathon more than it is a sprint. And just wanted to preface with that to make sure we approach this topic sensitively. But in the element of cyber security, you got to look at the amount of fatigue that can introduce a fog of decision making. It's no different than if you have a intoxicated individual checking email on a Saturday evening outside of work, but we have email on our phone because work follows us everywhere and it follows us where we let it. You have to take into account or take inventory of what is a good time to be accessing that kind of information or checking that kind of information. There was one phishing kit that I had sent out a number of years back, and it was end of a holiday weekend, and intentionally sent it out on a Saturday, Sunday evening when people were not in the office. They were maybe enjoying some beverages of choice and some healthy amount of substance usage. And, decision making is flawed. It's flawed in a perfectly sane, even keeled state of mind. And so
We're
whatever
humans.
can get in, yeah, exactly. And so whatever can get in and reduce that level of clarity or reduce that level of certainty, that could be stress, that could be mental fatigue, it could be a lack of quality of sleep.
Burnout.
Yeah, burnout. Any one of those things can just by 2% or 6% or 8% erode the level of awareness, situational awareness. No different than if you're going to a grocery store late at night, there's minimal lighting and it's maybe less safe. Your situational awareness is lessened, it's reduced. And so I think it's applicable here, not just to cyber practitioners, but simply anybody, that just like you don't operate a vehicle on little sleep late at night, there are certain times of which you should be aware of your current condition and what makes sense. Should you be working on something work related? Should you intentionally not be on your work laptop at certain hours? And certain organizations have time gated policies for things like this. But just as some first thoughts.
No, I appreciate you kind of outlining, our thoughts and feelings on that. Matt, did you have anything to add on that question? I think you're muted.
It shouldn't
There you
be.
go. Just unmuted you.
Oh, okay. About how it impacts cyber threats?
Yeah, like kind of like what Mike said, burnout, stress, all these things can really bring the human element into cybersecurity risk. I mean, you can really become an unintentional internal threat when you're not all mentally there or
Well,
tired.
honestly, it has. I mean, this answer is going to be contrary to what everybody else is saying, but it doesn't have that much of a bearing. A person that's going to make a mistake is going to make a mistake whether or not they have additional stress or other objects going on. External objects should be checked at the door when you come in. If you are not in a position where you are able to fulfill your duties and you are distracted, that's when you need to step away. But that that is going to be something that is going to impact a person whether or not they have those external forces. I'm of the firm belief that if somebody is going to make a mistake, they're not going to need that much of an external influence to make that mistake.
Yeah.
It's something that is going to be there either way. Could there be something that helps to drive that? Absolutely. But this is why when people are trying to attack different industries, they're going after the human side of things. They're not going after the technology. The technology, it's going to do what it's supposed to do no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Humans are the ones that are going to have the capability to make weird decisions. And that's
Unpredictable.
just, yeah, it's the chaos theory just personified, basically.
No, I'm glad you brought up, not wanting to come in or like do your job when you're not feeling 100%. And I think that comes down to the employer at the end of the day. I think it is important to be able to have that comfortability to tell like your employer or manager or whoever it is that you would need to tell like, hey, I'm not 100% today. I don't think it makes sense that I work today or that I handle certain situations today. So I think that's also something important and we can dive a little deeper into.
So
Um,
I can tell you right now, it's not the employer, it's the employee. The employee has to feel comfortable. Now, the employer needs to not have a retaliatory mindset. If
mhm.
somebody comes to you and says, I'm not in a good headspace right now, the last thing they need to be told is, well, you don't have any more vacation time or sick time, so you're just going to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
I've actually seen that happen back at a company that started with a giant M. The employees were, so when you got hired on, you were a contractor to start with. That's like their go-to. They did not hire full-time employees. You were contract for anywhere from a year to some people were 3 years before you got moved over to a full-time employee. Contractors did not get all of the vacation that the company actually looked at. So holidays, contractors were required to work those days in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes they would say we need a volunteer, we only need X amount of people. Some would get, the time off, etc. Contractors were not looked at in the same light as full-time employees, even though they were doing the same work and in many cases better because they still hadn't been converted over and had something to work towards. When a contractor would get sick, say they had something that was extremely bad, like they had walking pneumonia or something where you don't want to be in an office, you shouldn't be in an office,
Yeah.
they would have to take a week, 2 weeks off. The amount of time they actually had off that would be paid for was only like 4 or 5 days. After that, you had to take that time unpaid. Most of the people that were working there as contract did not have much of a buffer. They couldn't have that time off. So they had to come in and they had to work. They would tell people they were fine. They were really extremely sick. They're not in the headspace to be working. But they feared that if they told somebody that they weren't,
Up to
they
par.
weren't well enough, they weren't up to par, that there would be a retaliatory action taken against them. It would be documented that, oh, they took extra time off. We don't want to convert them over because somebody else over here who was just luckier didn't get sick and didn't need to take the time off.
Mhm.
So it's mostly, I mean, the employee has to be comfortable enough to be honest and open. And the employer needs to be understanding enough to understand that we're human.
Mhm.
We're not machines. We require regular maintenance, kind of like machines, but we need emotional maintenance. We don't necessarily just need the physical maintenance. So that's a big thing.
No, I'm glad we touched on that, and I think it is important to think too, it was my business or my decision, I'd rather have someone come in full force, full throttle, and have the energy and the capacity rather than someone coming in and giving, everything that they can, even though it's not there. So giving those little breaks or that availability to take your time and, recharge, I think is super important. So,
And we've had those conversations before where it helps
yeah.
to find an employer that is aligned with what your vision is, what
Hmm.
your mission is. You're going to be able to tell very quickly when you sit down and talk with an employer. If you bring up topics about mental health, they're going to be very quick to either try and change the topic because they don't have anything in place to support mental health in the workplace, or they're going to explain to you all the things they have that are in place to really help their employees and ensure that their employees are taken care of. It's it's becoming quite common that people need to have a way to address the mental health issues. So if you find a company and they're just brushing it off like, "Oh yeah, we can talk about that later." They're never going to talk about that later. They don't have anything in place to actually talk about. They just want you to come in so you can be an additional number in the machine. And if something happens and you get sick, or you have something that requires you to take time away because you are not in that right headspace, that's the same kind of company that's not going to hesitate to release you and hire somebody else because you're just another person to them.
Hmm.
You're a worker drone that is doing something that they need, and if you can't do it, then they'll find somebody else that can.
I know. I think it's funny how culture always comes back around in most of our conversations. So just keep that in the back of your mind when you are looking, or whether you're an employer or an employee seeking a new position. Just keep in mind culture is very important, because your work family becomes your family, becomes your day to day. So let's try to bring in something more relatable. Could you share any like real life examples where mental health issues could lead to significant cybersecurity incidents?
Yeah, I mean, on this point, and before I forget it, I love the emotional maintenance. We do need emotional maintenance. I love
Mhm.
that because there is an element to which we sometimes think as humans we're more durable or more resilient or more infallible than maybe machine or machinery or technology, and we need just as much uh, routine maintenance. I think that was a really good way of putting it, Matt. And the reality of that, the quality of your work matters, and I think that's the thread that it benefits both businesses and employee alike. This isn't a I don't want to go to work today, right? Like this
Yeah.
is the quality of my work would negatively reflect myself and the negatively reflect my company's reputation. And this really comes into play where you're in a customer facing or a consumer facing role. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to one of historically my favorite, I would say, fast food restaurants. It's not a drive through, but it's a fast food. You go in, you get your food, you get out. And how in the past 3 years, it is so consistently eroded to where you go in and nobody has a smile on their face. And then not in like a platitude, silly way, right? Everybody is miserable that is there. The quality of the work is reflected and the reputation of the company is negatively impacted, right? Because if that's how their employees feel like showing up to work every day, then what's the quality of care that's put into them? What's the quality of care that's put into the policy? Or I get it's a tough time right now and everybody's having a really hard time. So I'm not trying to say everybody put on your most happy face and go to work. But what I am
Yeah.
saying is that there are patterns and there are ways as an employer, as a company, that this benefits you more so than just doing good, more so than just taking care of people. Your company's image could be negatively affected if you fail to take inventory. And you know what? Maybe I'm not doing enough about this. Maybe I'm not talking about this enough. And to Matt's point, if you have an employee that comes up and has the guts to even say, I'm not in a great headspace right now, you got to think about the amount of effort mentally that led up to that point. Yes, there's going to be the 5 to 10% that abuse the rule and they're just, I don't want to come into work today, blah, blah, blah. Certainly, most certainly. And again, that's where it comes back to patterns. But for an individual to articulate that as a potential, I'm not 100%, I'm admitting some form of not weakness, but I'm not at my A game right now.
Yeah.
That takes a level of humility, and that needs to be recognized. And so there are ways to obviously catch precursor signs of mental health events, or just situations. But again, if you routinely check in with your team, you're in their life, you're building relationships in a professional manner, it is not something. There are certainly ways to dodge awareness, but you typically can pick up on it. You can pick up on morale. When morale's bad, when morale's good, and there's a level of awareness there that is required. But I think, again, specific to real life examples, we look at 2019, 2020 with COVID. There were phishing kits targeting emotional pressure plates of people that were not enduring that season well, and who are still attempting to cope with having to say goodbye to their loved ones over the phone. There was some dark moments in that 3 to 6 month stretch going into 2020, where there were certain policies and procedures that were maybe well intended, but maybe misaligned to reality and what would actually help. And there were real people dealing with some of those things, right? And so I think the real life examples of, hey, these are where the emotional pressure plates are going to reside. The devious part of threat actors is they look for those and capitalize on those. And so if there is a heightened awareness over medical health or flu season or something, then phishing emails crafted as the school nurse, or phishing emails crafted as the PTA or the school board, or things like that. Bad guys don't play by the rules. Right. And so I think we just need to be aware of where our emotional pressure plates, anything around children, anything around safety, anything around school. These are real life examples where mental health pressure points, as society and culture kind of evolve through these phases, need to be taken inventory on, number one. And again, as employers, as supervisors, we need to keep it an active topic. Right. We need to keep it an active topic. We shouldn't have to wait for this topic to come up. We should lead this. We should stay in tabs with this being an issue.
No, I completely agree. And I mean, I really agree with what Matt said about how we are human, and, attackers are going more on the human side rather than, doing the more work on hacking side, because we are human,
Right.
and because there are those pressure points that they know that they can push, and that they know that they can use by doing little to no recon. So now I'm really glad that you brought that up.
Right.
So we are huge on trying to bring some advice and tips for all of our topics we cover. So what steps would you say employers could take to create a supportive environment that reduces stress and promotes like a mental well-being, thus enhancing cybersecurity mindsets? Because, as you know, it could hang over end users that there's a lot of, possible attacks out there, and someone who's not fully trained or fully aware of all those attacks and how they take place, it could add additional stress.
Yeah, I think, covering the topic and tracking, we got a couple of questions in the chat as well. Just to round out this point, specific to what steps employers can take to create an environment that fosters this. Number one, it's, start talking about it, start talking about mental health more, start talking about the awareness that, hey, there are certain days when medically your vitals may be okay, but mentally your vitals may not be okay. And there's a difference, and there's a way to take inventory of that. And there are certain frameworks and measures to take inventory on. But again, has to come back to the company recognizing that, hey, no, this isn't an unlimited time off policy, right? Because with other things, you need doctor's notes. With other things, you need proof of an ailment, or proof of, hey, if you're going to miss work for 5 weeks or 6 weeks, then yeah, I need proof that you broke your leg, right? Because you still got to run a business. So within those bounds, there is a way to practically say, hey, this needs to be communicated well in advance. This needs to be communicated within your chain of command as far as your leadership goes, if there is something like this coming up. But again, I think number one, employers need to talk about it in order to not normalize it as much as, because work's not going to normalize it. Society has to, but specifically make it an okay topic to talk about. But there has to be a circle of trust for that to even take place. So at the end of the day, if your employees don't trust you, they're going to make up whatever excuse, tire got flat, whatever, right? But there needs to be a circle of trust, needs to be a circle of safety in order to discuss this and create a cultivated environment around this. So like at BLOKWORX, right? I think at BLOKWORX, we do a decent job of specifically capitalizing that, hey, time is of the utmost importance as it pertains to investing in family and personal growth and whatever your life is also calling you to do. So whether that's reserve military commitment, whether that's my kid has a kindergarten graduation or some specific event that I need to be there for as a parent, I think there's an awareness that work can take of there are other roles your employees carry in their life than the position that they hold at your company, right? And this isn't an idealism. I think this is something that a lot of companies are recognizing that, hey, I want the most motivated, hardest driving, most driven talent. And there's a way to honor other people in the other sections of their life. Yes, work is work. Yes, work still needs to get done and deliverables need to be met, most definitely. But in certain environments, there's a pretty wide left and right literal limit what that looks like. And so again, I think number one, you got to foster an environment of trust in order to start discussing a topic like this and make it okay. Just as Matt said, if there's reprimand or if there's something negative that comes up from somebody talking about this, whether that's overt, like external on like a company-wide meeting, or privately, like, hey, no, you can't take that time off because you took this last week. Like, that's how trust is eroded ultimately. And that's how you lose loyalty. And that's how you cause people to shop. And so again, be aware of the culture you're creating, take inventory of the culture you have. If you're especially brave and you're an employer, ask people about the culture. Ask people about the culture. What's the culture like working here? No other shoe's going to drop. No. We ask honestly and expect an honest answer, and you may get an accurate temperature of the room.
If they don't do any kind of a culture fit interview, then that is a dead giveaway, because you should be going through and having a meeting with the team themselves. You should be able to have a conversation with the team that you are going to be working with. If you don't have that capability, then I don't know. That's where you start to really question things, because if they're keeping you away from the team that you're going to work with before you start working with them, it makes you wonder what might actually come out when you sit down and talk to them.
No, I appreciate you guys digging deeper into that. And I think that's going to close off this part of our discussion. We actually have a really good question coming from one of our users. I'm going to go ahead and show it on our screen. That way we can get this answer for Ringer off of our Twitch channel. I believe he or she is navigating a roadmap for themselves on how to become a penetration tester. They're looking at cryptography. So if one of y'all too want to go ahead and dig deeper into that, I also want to let you know, Ringer, we do have a previous live stream or podcast version of the Safety Brief where we kind of did dig deeper into how to take your first steps into getting into the field of cybersecurity and things of that nature.
Right.
So if you're interested in that, feel free to navigate to our previous streams and go ahead and take a look at that video as well.
Yeah. Happy to cover this briefly. So specifically the question of cryptography as part of penetration testing, the best way I can equate the terms of vulnerability scanning and penetration testing is a vulnerability scan is externally casing a house, looking at what potential entry points, what potential weaknesses or gaps may exist in the home. You aren't touching the home. You aren't going in the home. You aren't doing anything like that. Now, there's certain vulnerability scans that, similar like a home inspection where you let somebody in, you come in, you look at the attic, look at the kitchen, look at the appliances, look at the date that they're manufactured, things like that. There's more exhaustive versions of vulnerability scan. Penetration testing is one that certainly media has caught hold of, and culture and movies like Mr. Robot and shows and things of that nature, where you are actively attempting to exploit those vulnerabilities in that environment. So it's not enough to, on a penetration test, to say, hey, that window is unlocked. It's what is possible because that window is unlocked. What is possible because of that vulnerability? Well, because of that vulnerability, I could go through the window, access the back door, open the back door where I can now carry out larger items. And, that's where property loss, financial loss, intellectual property loss, and informational loss could take place. And so cryptography is simply the study and science of encryption. And so, if you think of something in plain text, a lot of more popular verbiage around cryptography has come up with end-to-end encryption texting and messaging. So if you've heard of apps like Signal or Session or things of that nature, not WhatsApp, feel free to look up WhatsApp's privacy policies. It's not great. It's terrible. But if you hear more about end-to-end encryption and password managers and end-to-end text messaging and messaging, that's where cryptography is really going to be founded in a it's a wide landscape. A lot of people are talking about that right now. So, but cryptography is the study and the art of, more so, how do I take unsecured data, secure it, transport it through a medium, whether that's the internet, whether that's physically, whatever it is, right? Because you can go back to the Enigma in World War II, and there was a cryptographic protocol with that, right? And so, very broad topic there. But again, penetration testing, I am looking at a metaphorical home, which isn't a network. I am attempting to discover vulnerabilities about it, and then providing details in a written report or a video or something to a company that I'm rendering this service to about what the risk is associated with those vulnerabilities. But one thing to be very clear on here is penetration testing must be done with written and legal consent with anybody that it's being facilitated with. There is no legal bounds to just start penetration testing or vulnerability scanning any website, any entity, right? That's highly illegal. There's a number of laws and jurisdictions against that. And so, but yeah, hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity to the questions in chat around what is cryptography, how does it relate to penetration testing, and where to study. But again, it's a journey. And as Elizabeth said, specific to our safety brief and our series, we did hit one that is very much applicable to, hey, I'm getting my start in cybersecurity. What does this look like? And we can attempt to find that link and toss it over as well. So hopefully that's helpful.
My suggestion would be, if you're going to consider penetration testing, you need to first understand the defensive side of things. I see far too many people that watch Mr. Robot and they think, oh my God, this is awesome, I can do this. Right. No, you can't. Not without understanding the entire defensive side of what you're trying to get around and then finding a way to exploit it. And it's quite honestly not as fun as they make it seem on Mr. Robot. It's not throwing up one or two commands and, oh my God, I have access. It is a lot of work in order to get there. And a lot of the things that they do in that show are outside what you would normally be permitted to do. Obviously, the legality aspect of what they're doing is a little bit different given their goals. But when you sit down and you want to do pen testing, that's something that you have to look at. You may have a company that comes and asks you to do, X kind of testing. Well, you need to look at everything they are asking. What sort of legality is surrounding that? What does that open you up to? Because you have to remember, just because they're telling you that they want this to be done and it's their asset, doesn't mean that it may not open you up to something from a legal standpoint.
Right.
Contracts are there, but contracts don't give you immunity to the law.
Correct.
So it helps to know quite a bit about what you're doing before you set out to actually do it. I know there's a lot of companies out there now that are actually automating pen testing, which kind of kills the drive for a lot of people to go into a pen testing field. Those solutions will not replace what a human is capable of, because they're going to be automating runtimes and they're going to be looking for certain variables that they're going to operate on. What you're going to leverage, and what we were talking about earlier, the human aspect is, something that is very hard to predict. And that also falls under pen testing. You're trying to protect your environment against a set, what you think an attacker is going to do. But a lot of people forget that they don't all follow the same playbook. Some of them are going to do things that are just completely out of the ordinary, and it's going to work. Look at Sunburst. Nobody thought that somebody would poison an entire supply chain. I mean, that was something complete. That was the ultimate in pen test right there, and they succeeded.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot to look into, but Mike was right about his pathing and everything else, and that's something maybe we look at, you know, down the road doing another podcast about different specialties and, you know, what we would recommend as prerequisites before you go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys both for really digging deep into that question for Ringer, and thank you so much for coming in the chat and dropping questions. I would like to just kind of conclude that for you. While cryptography can be a part of what penetration testers evaluate, testing the strength of encryption methods used within a system, it's not a subnet of penetration testing. Just to initially answer your question, instead, cryptography is a specialized area within a broader field of cybersecurity, which also includes penetration testing as another specialized area. But they do go hand in hand. So, and another recent live stream that we did have was vulnerability scanning versus penetration testing. If that's another one that you would like to go ahead and look deeper into as well. So, well, that concludes our discussion today on mental health and cybersecurity in the workplace. I want to thank our insightful experts, Mike and Matt, for always sharing their expertise and perspectives. And remember, fostering a workplace environment that supports mental health not only benefits employees' well being, but also strengthens cybersecurity defense. So, as always, you guys stay frosty.
Thanks all.